What's up guys, Braden here with SuperATV. Today we're going to be showing you how to change a CV axle boot on a Rhino brand axle. As great as SuperATV's Rhino brand axles are, as well as the boots, you may run into a situation on the trail to where you damage a boot, or maybe it's just time to replace it. We're going to show you how to do this today with a few simple hand tools. As you can see, we got 2 hammers here, a pick, our TPEE boot band pliers that you can pick up from SuperATV.com, and a boot kit. In this boot kit, it's going to come with 2 band clamps, your snap ring, as well as a tube of grease. So on the Rhino brand axle, in the center, in between the 2 stickers, you're going to see a part number. You need to plug that part number in to SuperATV.com to find the correct boot for your specific axle. So let's get right to it. So we removed our axle from our machine and we've got it in our vise. As you can see here, we have a special tool that we can clamp our axle down without damaging the shaft. We know not everybody's gonna have this tool. If you need to put your axle in the vise, what you can do is wrap it in some rags and then clamp it down in the vise. That way you don't tear it up. So once you have your axle in the vise and you're all ready to go, you're gonna grab your boot band pliers, which you can purchase from SuperATV.com. And as you can see on this boot band here, it has 2 spots to where the pliers will fit. So they'll go in here like this, you're gonna squeeze it. Sometimes you can get them to release, sometimes you just have to kind of rotate and twist them around until you break them off. In this case, it didn't want to break, so what we're going to do is take a flathead screwdriver, slide in between here and pry it up, and it'll allow our boot band to come off. So we've got a flathead screwdriver, we're just going to slide it right underneath here. And again, we're not worried about our boot because obviously we're changing it. We're not worried about our clamp either because we're changing it as well. Just peel it off here, set it aside. Come right here to the CV. As you can see, we broke that one off. Came off nice and easy. And we're just going to peel our boot back. And this is the part where it's going to get messy, so you will need a rag. What I like to do is just go ahead and take a rag and start wiping some of this grease out. The more you can get wiped out, the better it's going to be on you as far as not making a mess. This CV grease is nasty stuff. So if you do get it on you, it's going to ruin some clothes. And this is where we were talking about earlier that there's 2 different styles of CVs that SuperATV offers in our Rhino brand axles. So this axle here is a lift kit axle. On the majority of our lift kit axles, we are going to have a BJ style CV, which the BJ style CV is the CV that is fixed to the shaft with a snap ring or a C-clip. So in order to remove this CV from the axle shaft, what we're going to have to do is take a hammer, place it right here, and then take our other hammer and smack this hammer to knock it off. That's perfectly fine to do this. One thing I don't recommend is taking one hammer and smacking it. It's kind of a crude way of doing it, and you can damage your cage as well as the splines on your axle shaft. So what we're going to do is we're going to pull it all the way out as far as it'll go. Take our hammer, sit it like this. Take our other hammer, give it a smack. You can see we didn't get it that time. We're going to do it again. So just like that, that's all there is to it. You don't have to get crazy. You don't have to smack it too hard. As long as you're using 2 hammers, it's nice and safe. You're not going to damage anything. I highly recommend using 2 hammers though. Using one, you can damage your splines, you can damage the cage, the CV. All around, just a good idea to use 2 hammers. So now we're going to grab our boot, pull it right off, just like that, set it aside. So now we're going to take a pick and remove our C-clip off of our axle shaft here. Just pick up on it with the pick, Just kind of wiggle the pick in there, and then just roll it. Just gonna roll it off just like that and discard it. And then we can go ahead and take our new boot, slide it on. Just go ahead and slide it back out of the way for a second. Take our new C-clip. We're just gonna roll this on to the splines, just like that. There's a new clip. So now we're gonna try to get all of the grease that we can possibly get out of the CV now that it's removed from the axle shaft. And I'm not gonna lie to you, this is a messy job. You're gonna need a lot of rags for this one. So just take your finger, slide it down into the CV, and just start working that grease up and out. Obviously, you're not gonna be able to get everything out, but the more you get out, the better, especially on a high mileage axle. You know, all the grease is going to be kind of old and nasty and not doing what it's supposed to anymore. So we're just going to keep wiping this out. Like I said, it's one of those things, you can't get it all, but definitely put in a solid effort to get as much as you possibly can out. It just benefits you and your axle longevity of the axle and the CV. So I think I've got about as much grease as I can get out of there without taking the cage out, which we do not recommend you taking the cage out of here. It can be done, but it's not a good idea. You might as well leave the axle alone. The orientation of the bearings and everything inside of the cage, you know, they already have wear on them. It's not good to really change the orientation of that. So we're gonna grab our new tube of grease, go ahead and open it up, stick it right down inside of the CV, and just fill it up. And fill it up. If you get it all the way cleaned out, it's going to accept the whole tube. We didn't get every little last bit of grease out of here, so it did not accept the whole tube. So now what we're going to do is, if you're working on the outer CV, which we are, so you're going to have a castle nut that came off the machine, take the castle nut, thread it on backwards, just like so. So that way the flat side of the castle nut is facing out. So now we're going to take our CV and slide it back on. Just get it rotated good. And then we can take a hammer and you're going to tap this back on. But make sure, it's very important that you have that castle nut threaded on backwards. That way you're not going to hit the threads or anything like that, tear the axle or the CV up. So as you can see, it went right on. We'll take that grease and kind of work it down a little bit. We want to try to keep the grease off of the boot surface where it's going to be mounting to the CV. Again, like I said, this is a messy job here. And then just go through and wipe off any excess grease around your mating surface here for your boot. That's very important. All right, so now we're going to take our boot and we are going to slide it up onto the CV. Just going to slide it on the CV, just like that. Then you want to slide it up. You can see on your axle shaft, there's a little dimple right here on the shaft. You need to make sure your boot pops over top of that. What that is, that's to retain this boot from wanting to slide up and down the shaft. So make sure you get that boot all the way up there. Then you're going to take your new clamps. If you kind of squeeze them together by hand, they pop apart. And slide it on here without pulling it apart too much. Kind of go up here like this. Then you're going to grab your boot band pliers. Kind of hold that in place. Kind of squeeze it, and then just work back to this next lip. Make sure that the boot is where it needs to be. And you'll hear it pop. Once it pops, you know you got a good connection there. And it's going to seal up really nice. And again, just make sure that there's no grease on the boot itself on the outside or the mating surface on the CV. Ours is good and clean. We're going to take this boot. Get it lined up. So once we have a clamp where it needs to be, clamp it, just like so. And as you can see, we have our clamp here. It's making a good clamp, as well as our clamp on our CV. This axle is... So for this specific axle, even though the CVs look different, and they are different, the boot's the same, and the CV internals are the same, the way that it actually mounts to the shaft. So the process would be exactly the same on this side as it would this side, and that's very common for our lift kit axles, for it to be that way on a BJ style CV. Now we're gonna grab the DOJ style axle, throw it up here on the vise, and we're gonna show you the process on that. All right, so now we're gonna show you the process on changing the boot on a DOJ style CV'd axle. First things first, we're gonna go ahead and remove our boot clamps. Squeeze it together as tight as you can. We just broke the clamp. It's perfectly fine. We're not gonna be reusing it. Grab our boot. Peel it back. So on the DOJ style CV, which is what we have here, there is a retaining clip inside of the CV that you have to remove. The best way to do it is to find one of these notches here. As you can see, they're all over the CV. And then take a pick, slide it right down behind there, just like so. Remove the retaining clip. You'll want to just set it aside for the time being, and then get your CV straight. Pull it right off. All right, so we have our CV removed. We're going to wipe our cage off. You're going to be mindful that these bearings, these ball bearings that are on the cage, they can fall out if you're not careful, and if they do fall out, you just want to make sure you put them right back where they came from. Wipe it off really good, get it good and clean. Just trying to get the most amount of grease possible, and then we're going to try to get all of that grease out of the CV here. So I'm just going to take my rag, stuff it inside the CV, and then just kind of one big scooping motion, and then this is going right into the trash. So we're going to take another rag and repeat the same process. On the DOJs, you can get them perfectly clean. Honestly, you can clean these until there's absolutely no grease in it. I recommend getting it as clean as you can possibly get it. So we're just going to keep putting rags in here and wiping until we get all the grease out. All right, so now that we have everything cleaned up, we're gonna go ahead and knock the cage off of the shaft here. I like to get everything as clean as possible. That way, if you were to knock this cage off and it landed, it didn't get grease all over the place. Same way with the CV. And also, you don't wanna try to knock the CV off you don't wanna try to knock the cage off while the CV is still attached with the C-clip on there. It can damage this clip, it's pretty thin. You don't wanna smack on it or beat on it or anything like that. So we're going to take our two hammers, place one there, and then just tap this right off. So there we go. Got our cage removed. And you always want to be sure of the orientation when this goes back together, which we will talk about that. Now that we have our cage off, just go ahead and grab your boot, pull it off and discard it. Now we're going to grab our boot kit and go ahead and open it up and remove the contents. So now we're going to remove our C-clip off of our axle shaft, same way we did previously. Go ahead and remove it and discard it. Now we're going to grab our new boot, slide it on, slide it up out of the way. We'll take our new clip, get it on the splines, just like that. And then it is imperative that you follow the same orientation that you previously had. So the larger diameter end needs to face outward. The end that the cage is exposed needs to face towards the inside. So what I like to do here is get a 24mm socket and smack the center of the cage here. So we're gonna put that socket right there and we're gonna smack it right back onto the axle shaft. All right, so we have our 24mm socket. Now we're just gonna smack our cage back on, just like so. Once it's on there, I like to give it one more little tap, just to make sure that it completely engaged on the C-clip. Give it a couple tugs, just to make sure that it's on there good. You don't want it to pull apart on you. All right, now we're gonna take our grease, open it up, and fill our CV up. And we got this one good and clean, so it's gonna take the whole tube. Take it, slide it back on, same orientation as before. Just like that. And we're gonna take our retaining clip, make sure it gets back in its channel it's supposed to be. Just pull out on it. Just make sure the CV's on there good. You don't want it to pull apart or anything like that. Then we're gonna wipe this CV down. We will get a little bit of brake clean for this one. And then also right here on the shaft, just wipe that. Just make sure we get it good and clean, good and dry. We don't want any grease on our boot sealing surface. So I'll grab our boot. Slide it up there. Make sure that we're in the correct clamping position here. Just like so. Grab our clamp, pop it apart. Get our boot pliers. Make sure you have it where you want it. Squeeze it till it pops. And this one, you can see the clamps kind of popped up right here a little bit. If that happens, carefully take a screwdriver and just tap it straight down. All that's doing is making sure that our clamp doesn't pop off. And as you've seen on the last time on the BJ style, that didn't even happen to us. It doesn't happen every time, but if it does, where that tab sticks up like that, just take a flathead screwdriver and tap it down, but just be sure that you don't make contact on the boot. this. I'm just going to kind of get it in place here. Hold it. Get our boot pliers. Make sure our boot's in the right place. Make sure our clamp's in the right place, and then clamp her down. Now, as you can see, our boot's on there good. It doesn't want to spin or turn. If it does spin or turn when the clamp is tightened down, that means you have installed the incorrect clamp or boot or both. So always make sure that the boot doesn't want to spin. You should be able to grab it and try to turn it, and it shouldn't turn at all. And that's all there is to it. All right, guys, so that's all there is to it to change a CV axle boot on a Rhino brand axle. Whether you have a BJ style or a DOJ style CV, be sure to check out SuperATV.com for all your off-roading needs. And also, be sure to drop a like, comment, and subscribe. Thanks for watching. We'll see you on the next one.